Millionaire pretends to be paralyzed to test his fiancée. What happened next shocked him. What would you do if you suspected the person you loved most was only with you for your money? One billionaire didn't just wonder. He set the ultimate trap. And on their wedding day, he sprung it. Have you ever looked at a perfect picture? You know, one of those beautiful glossy photos, and then you hold it a little closer, and you see the tiny cracks in the frame? That's where this story begins. Not with a bang, but with a whisper of doubt. Our story is about a man named Lucian Vance. Now, from the outside, Lucian had it all. He was a billionaire, the kind of man who moved through the world with quiet power. He lived in a breathtaking penthouse in North Crest Heights, where the windows were so clean the city below looked like a sparkling painting. He had built an empire from the ground up, and he had a fiancée named Alara Sterling who was, by all accounts, dazzling. Alara was the kind of woman who turned heads. She was elegance personified. When she smiled for the cameras at their lavish engagement brunch, it was like a flash of sunlight. She knew exactly what to say, how to stand, which fork to use. People would look at them together. Lucian with his quiet intensity, Alara with her radiant charm, and they'd think, now there's a perfect couple. They have everything. But Lucian had started to hear the whispers behind the picture-perfect silence. It wasn't anything big at first. It was the little things. The way Alara would accept a glass of champagne from a server without a word of thanks, and then subtly wipe the rim with her napkin. The way her smile, so bright and warm in public, would vanish the second the last guest left the room, leaving her face smooth and cold as marble. He noticed how she'd walk ahead of him through doors, letting them swing shut behind her. He'd hear her on the phone, her voice that sweet, melodic tone she used for the public, but her words were all commands. Fix it. Handle it. I don't care how. Just make it happen. One evening, he was in the kitchen getting a glass of water. Two of the kitchen staff were whispering near the pantry, not knowing he could hear them. She's stunning, sure, one murmured, polishing a wine glass to a shine. But the vibe is chilly. The other nodded, keeping her voice low. He seems like a decent man. A good man. I hope he sees what we see. Their words weren't meant to be cruel. They were weary. They were the observations of people who'd learned to read the weather in a house, and they sensed a storm coming. Lucian tried to shrug it off. He told himself he was being paranoid. People have bad days, right? He'd built his fortune on reading patterns, on data, and he tried to apply that logic here. But the pattern was stacking up, tiny moment by tiny moment, and it was forming a picture he didn't like. The biggest crack in the frame had a name: Julian Croft. Julian was Lucian's business partner, his right-hand man for years. They'd started in a cramped office together, surviving on coffee and big dreams. But lately, Julian was around the penthouse a lot, and he was always near Alara. Lucian would catch them sharing a laugh in the corner of a room. A laugh that would stop a little too quickly when he walked over. He saw the way Julian would touch Alara's arm when he spoke to her. A familiarity that felt off. It was a seed of suspicion, and it planted itself deep in Lucian's heart, growing thorns of unease. The doubt began to eat away at him. He'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, while Alara slept beside him. He'd think, does she love me? Or does she love the life I can give her? What happens if this all goes away? What happens if I can't be the strong, powerful provider anymore? It's a terrifying question to ask yourself. It makes you feel alone in a crowded room. And that's when the idea came to him. It was a desperate, crazy idea. But for a man who tested everything, every business deal, every piece of software, every structural beam in his buildings, It made a twisted kind of sense. He needed to test this. He needed to test her. He thought, if love is real, it has to be strong enough to hold you when you're at your weakest. If it's not real, well, the fall will show you the truth. So, he devised a plan. A painful, drastic plan. He would create a test. He would fake a terrible accident. He would make the world believe that Lucian Vance, the powerful billionaire, was broken, paralyzed, confined to a wheelchair. It was a horrifying gamble. He was risking his entire world on the answer to one question. Who was Ilara Sterling when the cameras were off and the burden was on? The accident was set in motion. A quiet word with his most trusted driver. A carefully placed rumor. A few days at a private clinic. And then, the day came for him to return home to Northcrest Heights. He came home in a wheelchair. His body was perfectly fine, but he played the part with every ounce of his being. He let his shoulders slump. He let his voice become a little weaker. He saw the looks on the faces of his staff. The shock, the genuine pity, the sadness. Maria, his housekeeper, had tears in her eyes as she helped adjust his chair. Their kindness, their gentle hands, almost broke him. And then there was Ilara. Her performance was masterful. At first, she gasped. She cried perfect, delicate tears. She fussed over his blanket. She adjusted his pillows. She said all the right things. "Oh, my darling, we'll get through this. I'm here. I'll always be here." But Lucian was watching, and he saw what others might have missed. He saw the way her eyes didn't actually get red from the crying. He saw the way her touch was clinical, efficient, not comforting. He saw the way she looked at the wheelchair not with sadness, but with annoyance, like it was a piece of ugly furniture that was ruining her beautiful home. The mask was on, but it was already starting to slip. The first few days were a tense performance. Lucian, playing the part of the helpless invalid. Ilara, playing the part of the devoted caretaker. But patience was never her virtue. It started with a sigh. He asked for a glass of water one evening. Just a simple glass of water. And she let out this long, heavy sigh, as if he'd ask her to move a mountain. She slammed the glass down on the table next to him so hard that water sloshed over the side. "There," she said, her voice tight. And she walked away. Lucian sat there, staring at the water droplet rolling down the side of the glass. His heart felt like a cold, hard stone in his chest. That sigh, that simple, impatient sigh, was louder than any declaration of love she had ever shouted. The test was working. He was getting his answer, and it was breaking his heart. But he couldn't stop now. He had to see how deep the rabbit hole went. He had to let them believe they had won. He had to be silent, and watch, and wait for the mask to fall off completely. He just didn't know that when it finally did, the face underneath would be so much colder, so much crueler, than he ever could have imagined. The sigh was just the beginning. After that, the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. The woman I loved, or thought I loved, vanished, and someone else took her place. Someone with cold eyes and a colder heart. The devoted caretaker act didn't last a week. The glamour, the elegance, it all peeled away, showing the raw, ugly truth underneath. My home, my beautiful penthouse in Northcrest Heights, became a gilded cage. And Ilara became my jailer. Her impatience curdled into cruelty. It was in the little things, the ones designed to make me feel small. She'd forget to bring me meals, leaving me sitting for hours until Maria would quietly sneak in with a sandwich, her eyes filled with a sadness that shamed me. Ilara would park my wheelchair in a patch of blinding sun on the terrace and then get distracted by a phone call, leaving me there to bake. She'd talk about parties and events right in front of me, sighing, "I suppose we can't go anymore," as if I were an inconvenient piece of luggage. And the words were the worst. The whispered insults she thought I couldn't hear. "Useless," she'd mutter under her breath after helping me into bed. What a pathetic way to end up. I'd just close my eyes and take it. Every cruel word, every neglectful act, was another piece of evidence. Another nail in the coffin of the life we were supposed to have together. But the real betrayal, the one that carved a hole right through me, involved Julian. My friend, my partner, the man I'd trusted with my company and my secrets. He started visiting more often. He'd stride in, clap me on the shoulder a little too hard, and say things like, "Don't you worry, Lucian. We're keeping the ship afloat." And then he'd disappear into the study with Alara. Their whispers slithered under the door. I'd sit there, in the hallway, pretending to be lost in thought. But I was listening. I was always listening. One night, I pretended to be asleep. The door to my room was slightly ajar. I saw them standing in the hall, silhouetted by the low light. "It's almost over," Alara whispered, her voice tight with excitement. "The wedding, then the divorce. The prenup won't mean a thing when the world sees him like this. He'll be too humiliated to fight." Julian chuckled, a low, ugly sound. "And then it's all ours. Everything he built." "Everything we built," Alara corrected him. I felt a rage so pure and so hot it was a miracle I didn't leap out of that chair right then and there. But I didn't. I held on. I held on because I knew this wasn't just about greed anymore. This was about something darker. It was Maria, my housekeeper, who confirmed my deepest fear. She found me in the library one afternoon, her hands trembling. She looked terrified. "Mr. Vance," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I can't stay quiet. I saw Mr. Croft in the pantry yesterday. He had a small bottle. He was pouring something into it. He didn't see me. And later, I heard Ms. Sterling tell the chef you were never going to recover. She said it would be a mercy. Sir, I think they're trying to." She couldn't finish. She didn't have to. The look in her eyes said it all. Poison. They weren't just going to take my money. They were going to end me to get it. I took her hand. It was ice cold. "Maria," I said, my voice calm, though my soul was screaming. "You have done more than enough. Thank you. Now, please act normal. Leave the rest to me." The test was over. This was no longer about revealing character. This was about survival. And it was time to set the final stage for their reckoning. They wanted a wedding? I'd give them a wedding. The day of the ceremony arrived. St. Ignatius Chapel was filled to the brim with every flower you could imagine. The air was thick with perfume and the soft, hushed murmur of hundreds of guests. Everyone was there. Society pages, business associates, so-called friends. They all thought they were attending a tragedy. A beautiful, brave woman marrying her poor, paralyzed fiancé. It was the story of the year. I was rolled down the aisle in my wheelchair. I kept my face a blank slate, a mask of quiet resignation. I saw the pitying looks, the sad smiles. I saw it all. And then the music swelled. And there she was, Alara, a vision in a white silk gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her veil was lace, her smile was radiant. She floated towards me, and in her eyes, I didn't see love. I saw triumph. She looked at me, broken in my chair, and she saw her victory. She saw her payout. She saw the end of the road. Julian stood proudly with the groomsmen, smirking like he'd already won the lottery. They had no idea that every cruel word, every conspiratorial whisper, every drop of poison they'd plotted had been documented. That Maria was sitting in the back row, ready to testify. That the police were waiting just outside the chapel doors. The officiant began the vows. He spoke about love and commitment and faithfulness. The irony was almost too much to bear. He turned to Ilara. "Do you, Ilara, take Lucian to be your husband? To love him, to comfort him, to honor and keep him, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live." Her voice was clear as a bell, full of fake emotion. "I do." Then he turned to me. "And do you, Lucian, take Ilara?" This was it. The moment. The entire chapel was silent, waiting for my weak, whispered, "I do." But I didn't say it. I took a deep, steadying breath. And then, I did the one thing nobody in that entire building expected me to do. I stood up. I pushed myself up from that wheelchair, my legs strong, my posture straight. The gasps that echoed through the chapel sounded like one collective, shocked scream. I saw the color drain from Ilara's face so fast I thought she might faint. Her perfect smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. Julian's smirk melted away, his jaw hanging open in utter disbelief. The silence was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. I looked Ilara straight in the eye, my voice strong and clear, carrying to every corner of the room. "For months," I began, "I have sat in silence. I have listened to you. I have watched you. I heard you plan to take my money. I heard you mock my weakness. I heard you plot with him," I said, pointing a steady finger at Julian. "To poison me. To end my life for your gain." The crowd erupted in horrified whispers. Cameras started flashing. "You thought my weakness was your opportunity," I continued, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a fierce, righteous calm. "But it was a test you failed in the most spectacular, most horrific way possible. This," I gestured around at the beautiful chapel, the flowers. "This wasn't a wedding. It was a reckoning." On cue, the chapel doors opened. Uniformed officers walked in. The crowd parted for them as they made their way to the altar. Ilara started to cry, real tears this time, tears of panic and rage. "You monster! You set me up!" she screamed, but her words were lost in the chaos. I watched as they put handcuffs on her pristine white wrists. They did the same to Julian, who was too stunned to even speak. They led them away, their fairy tale ending in perp walks and screaming headlines. The guests were in an uproar. The picture-perfect wedding was now a true crime scene. As the chaos began to settle, I looked out at the stunned faces. I saw Maria, and she gave me a small, tearful nod. I felt a weight I'd been carrying for months finally lift from my shoulders. The lesson wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. I had learned the hardest way possible that real love isn't about the grand gestures in the spotlight. It's about who brings you a glass of water without a sigh. It's about who stands by you when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Wealth can buy you a beautiful stage, a gorgeous set, and a cast of thousands. But it can't buy character. That's something you have to build for yourself. And that day, in that broken chapel, I finally knew the truth. I was free of them, and I was finally at peace. If this story of overcoming adversity touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories that show how true excellence always finds its way, regardless of the obstacles that try to block it.